The road to the summit, a life-changing journey. Once upon a time, there was a young man who dreamed of changing his life. He lived in a small village where people were accustomed to monotony. But inside him burned a fire that refused to let him stay still. His dream was to conquer a great mountain, the one that loomed beyond the edges of his village, seemingly unreachable. For many, it was just part of the horizon, but for him, it was a symbol of possibility. One cloudy morning, while the village was still asleep, the young man packed his bag, put on his worn-out boots, and stepped out of his home. He looked up at the mountain and felt a pang of fear. "What if I can't make it?" he thought. But another voice within him replied, "What if you change your life forever?" The first steps were easy. He walked along familiar paths where there were no obstacles yet. But as he climbed higher, the journey became harder. The stones under his feet were slippery, the wind tore at his clothes, and the sun beat down relentlessly. Yet he kept telling himself, "Every step is a victory. Don't stop." Soon, as he reached the midpoint, his strength began to wane. He sat down, looking back at the village which now seemed so small. In those moments, the temptation to return home grew strong. But then he remembered the words of his old teacher. "You can't discover new horizons if you're afraid to leave the shore." His journey was full of unexpected encounters. He met others who were also climbing toward the summit. Some were strong and experienced, while others were beginners just like him. They shared food, advice, and sometimes just a kind word. "We're stronger together," they told him. And those words became his new mantra. But there were moments when everything seemed hopeless. One day, he slipped and fell, hitting the rocks hard. His hands were bloody and his eyes filled with tears. He lay there on the cold ground thinking, "Maybe this is a sign that I should stop." But then he heard a rustle nearby. A small bird landed on a rock beside him. It looked so tiny and fragile, yet it flew so high in the sky. "If it can, so can I," he said to himself as he stood up. The road to the summit became a school of life. He realized that every step taught him patience, every obstacle made him stronger, and every encounter enriched his spirit. Finally, he saw the last climb ahead of him. The summit was so close he could almost touch it. His heart raced and his breath grew heavy. With one final push, he reached the top. What lay before him was beyond anything he had imagined. The entire world stretched out below his feet. Mountains, lakes, and clouds floated beneath him. It was so beautiful that he couldn't hold back his tears. He realized that this summit was not just an end point. It was a symbol of what he was capable of. He stood there and thought, "If I could do this, I can do anything." And these words became his new life motto. When he returned to his village, he was a completely different person. Not because he had conquered the mountain, but because he had conquered his fears, doubts, and weaknesses.